Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Well, last week, Donald Trump officially became the Republican Party's presidential candidate, putting his family front and centre in his bid to make America great again. But for all the glamour of Team Trump, just as striking were those missing. A number of senior Republicans, including none other than the former Bush presidents, both of them choosing to stay away. And one of those who did address the convention was Senator Tom Cotton. Now, he's a man perhaps we don't know too much about in the UK, but tipped as a future leader of the party. And I caught up with him in Cleveland.
Well, I think America is great, but I don't think we've been living up to our potential over the last 7.5 years. And I think a Republican president with a Republican Congress will make America safer and more prosperous in the next 4 years.
Very diplomatic, may I say. That's a Republican president. Well, if there is to be one, it can only be Donald Trump.
Yeah, and I said in my speech the other night that...
But could he be a great president?
Well, we haven't had many great presidents, and a lot of them you might not have thought they were going to be great in advance if you look at, say, the backgrounds of Abraham Lincoln or FDR or Ronald Reagan. So right now I would take a president who will make America safer, get America working again, and get people back to work. I don't think Hillary Clinton will do that. I think in a Trump-Pence administration with a Republican Congress, we will.
Would you rather have seen somebody else standing for the Republican Party?
No, that's water under the bridge. At this point, Donald Trump and Mike Pence is our ticket, and I want to make sure that Republicans win up and down the ballot.
But would you say the Republican Party now seems united after this convention? There's been a lot of bumps along the road during the course of the week.
I think we're united, but you know, unity is not enough for us. Republicans are not a majority in this country. Democrats aren't either, fortunately, but we have to leave Cleveland focused on appealing to the independents, the moderates, even the disaffected Democrats who are looking for a change in direction, and that is a pretty broad majority of our country.
You mentioned the speeches. I vaguely remember your own speech. I say that because the New Yorker magazine called it the most forgettable speech of the convention, and almost saying that you did that deliberately, that you're keeping your powder dry. You have so many policy differences with the candidate Trump.
Well, it was a special occasion for me and for my family as well, so it was memorable for them. You know, they asked me to speak about our troops and how we can better serve them so they can serve us. And for the last 7 years, we've seen dramatic cuts to our military budget. So I wanted to send a very clear message to those troops and their families that in a Trump-Pence administration with a Republican Congress, help is on the way in the form of more money for our defense.
Do you think that Donald Trump's worldview is too isolationist?
Well, we have some differences of opinion, but you know, let's not forget that Barack Obama has been unsettling our allies pretty severely for the last 7.5 years. You know, he implied in a magazine article just a couple months ago that the UK was not a reliable ally. He went to London and essentially threatened British voters that they would not get a favorable trade deal if they exercised their sovereign right to govern themselves and to leave the European Union. So I strongly disagree with those comments, just as I have some differences of opinion with Donald Trump.
You've touched on it then, the issue of the United Kingdom leaving the European Union. Well, what's your view? You didn't like what Barack Obama said. What is your view about how the United States should treat the UK when it comes to trade deals?
Well, I think the UK will be great in or out of the European Union. You know, I didn't express an opinion during the debate. I thought it was a decision for the British voters. It's one thing for foreign leaders to express an opinion, but it's another thing to do what Barack Obama and some of the leaders on the continent did, which is threaten punitive retaliation against your people for exercising that right. I understand a lot of the frustrations of British voters in dealing with the regulatory superstructure of Brussels, as well as, you know, the uncontrolled flow of migrants into the UK as well. Those are some of the same challenges that we have in the United States with the way Washington has been failing the states and failing our communities.
And you also detect in that vote in the United Kingdom some of the same eddies amongst the population, a population that feels that the political elites don't speak for them and leaving them behind.
There are populist insurgencies on both sides of the Atlantic, on both the right and the left. And that is because people across these nations feel that their leaders are not addressing the very real anxieties they have. An economy in which wages are not increasing, the cost of living is growing up. You know, in Europe, you have a serious migrant problem from Syria and other points south that is threatening your communities. We have some of the same challenges with mass immigration here in this country. So our leaders, rather than trying to hold back those populist forces, they should address the underlying anxieties that the voters have if they really want to be leaders.
Well, should you build a wall along the Mexican border then?
Well, we should have a fence on our southern border. And in fact, Congress has mandated a fence for over 20 years, yet there's not a fence. That's an example of how Washington overpromises and underdelivers, and the American people are angry with that kind of poor performance. But look, I mean, you know, we have a southern border in which we have a lot of illegal immigration. A fence would stop that. A fence has stopped it in other places on our border where it's been built. It's stopped it in other nations.
And mass deportation of illegal immigrants?
No, because obviously that would lead to the kind of enforcement, organization and mass budget expenditures that we simply can't afford, and that would be not in keeping with the practices of U.S. civil liberties going back 100 years. But we need to get serious about immigration. We do need to build a fence. We do need to control immigration levels, and we do need to make sure that people with visas are coming in, doing their business on their visa, and leaving at the right time.
Just want to go back to the international dimension. And do you feel that Donald Trump has overdone his admiration for President Vladimir Putin?
Well, Vladimir Putin is no friend of the United States or the West, and it's important that we remember that.
But candidate Trump admires some of his qualities.
Well, I suspect after this week, once Donald Trump, as all nominees have in the past, begin to receive the intelligence briefings that I've received as a member of the Intelligence Committee, his perspective might change, and he might realize that Vladimir Putin is no friend of the United States. He doesn't have our best interests at heart. He doesn't have any interests at heart. His fundamental objective is to divide the West, and specifically to divide the United States from Europe.
And that's one of the key concerns within Europe and within NATO members within Europe, that again Donald Trump hasn't been crystal clear that as the foremost power within NATO, the United States would intervene should Mr. Putin threaten any part of that alliance, particularly those countries that border Russia.
Yeah. Well, we need to focus on making NATO stronger. Part of that is making sure that European members are meeting the 2% GDP commitment that we all made a few years ago, but part of it is being clear that the Article 5 security guarantee is ironclad. You know,
that's not coming, that's my point. That doesn't seem to be coming from Donald Trump. An attack against one of us is an attack against all of us.
Well, I hope he makes it clear. He said that he didn't want to specify how he would respond with a Russian attack against a NATO member. I think there's some wisdom in not specifying the exact response we would undertake, and he said that in other security systems around the world as well. But we have to be clear that Article 5 is ironclad, and we will respond to any request by a European country that is under attack under Article 5. How we might respond, what kind of military forces we might use, what other levers we might use, I think it's best to leave that to practical judgment at the time, and perhaps leave Vladimir Putin and other adversaries guessing. But Article 5 is ironclad, and we have to remember as Americans, we are not a member of NATO, and we haven't made Article 5 pledges because it's a charitable gesture. It's not out of the goodness of our heart, it's because it's in our best security interests.
And lastly, Senator, may I ask you about your own ambitions? You're a young man, and it's said, partly because of that speech and obviously because of your abilities, you might fancy a run should President Trump, should he fail over the 4 years, you might fancy a run in 2020 or in 2024?
Well, 2020 and 2024 are a long ways away. I'm focused right now on 2016, and to make sure that we elect Republicans up and down the ballot, because I'm focused on serving the people who sent me to the Senate in Arkansas, and also making this country safer and more prosperous. In the future, I'll make any decisions as they arise.
Senator Cotton, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Appreciate it.